Hi friends, I'm Jack Watson and I am a full-time UI UX designer, illustrator, animator, donut connoisseur, and today I'll be your host for an Illustrator Foundations Challenge. We will be going over some lighting basics, looking at how we can use tools in Illustrator to depict different lighting situations, but before we get started, right below me in the description under this video, you'll find all the links to other challenges, our Discord communities, and a link to download your resources to create along with us. Hopping over to Illustrator, once you open the starter file, you'll see an artboard and resources over here off to the side. Here's our artboard. And today we're just going to use our artboard space to practice and explore. I'm going to start by going over here. I'm going to draw out a circle. I'm going to click and hold on the rectangle tool here to get to my ellipse. And I'm going to draw out a circle, just kind of holding down shift in the upper left here. And there we go. So I'll use this circle. I'm holding out, did I say I was holding down shift? I was holding down shift to constrain it. I'll use this circle in the upper left of my artboard as a reference or a reminder for my light source. I learned beginning with upper left-hand lighting, so that's what I'm going to do today. I can even go in here. I'll zoom in. And I'm going to switch to the pen tool, and I can draw out a line that's going to indicate the direction of our light. So I've got Smart Guides on under View, Smart Guides, and that's what's causing those little pink indicators. When I hover close to the center there, it's going to show me that I'm aligned, and I can click and I can click to draw out a line indicating our light source. So I'm just going to deselect that. Now I'm going to draw out a circle, another circle, holding down shift with the circle tool. I'm going to drag to create a larger circle. This is going to be our object for today. I'm just going to slide it over with the selection tool. And we're not going to need a stroke on this. So I am going to click over here where I've got my fill and stroke selector, and I am just going to choose none since I don't need a stroke on that. Alright, so now I'm going to add a gradient to this. Going over to my gradient panel over here, if you're not seeing it, you can access it by going to Window, Gradient, and it'll pop it up. I am going to click on my fill to bring it forward, and when I click on the gradient, it's going to add a gradient to our shape. But that's not really what we want. You can pick over here in the type of gradient, a radial gradient. And that is going to match the shape of our gradient to the shape of our object. If we were working with a rectangle or something that had sharp sides, we would use a linear gradient. Okay, so this is already starting to look like it's got a little bit of dimension, just because we've got that sort of soft transition from light to dark. But I need to make some adjustments to kind of fit my my imaginary lighting situation here. So I am going to switch over now to using the gradient tool. The gradient tool is the same. It's connected to the gradient panel over here, but it lets us kind of manipulate our gradient's shape. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to get this little widget here in the center, and if I click on just the bar where my mouse hovers and changes cursor, I can drag it up. I'm going to drag it towards my light source, so I'm moving my gradient towards that light source, just to kind of shift it a little bit in that direction. You could really pull it over if you wanted to kind of make your object look like it's turning in space. Today we're going to be working with lighting. We're going to imagine that it is at the front of our shape, and we're not doing backlighting, so we're just going to leave it like this for now. Okay, so let's start to add some pieces and parts, kind of defining our kind of like shading on our structure, right? We're going to use this as a reference, this first one here, so we can kind of refer back to these pieces and parts, right? So I'm going to click on the type tool. I'm just going to click, and it's going to put some lorem ipsum, some placeholder text there. I'll scale it up a little bit, going over to the character panel, and I'll make it something like 21 or 24 so we can see it. I'll grab the selection tool and move it down. And the first thing that we are going to label is the brightest part of our shape here, which is called the highlight. So there we go, we've got a highlight there. And I will switch over to the pen tool again, and I'm just going to click underneath our text. I'll draw a line out pointing to that highlight on our shape. I will go over to our fill and stroke again, and I will swap it. So now we've got our we've got a kind of like a line pointing to where our highlight is on our shape, right? So I'm going to switch over again to the type tool, and I am going to type out our next item. Our next item on this is going to be our core shadow. So I'll type out core shadow just by tapping core shadow. And I am going to move this down. All right, so our highlight is the brightest area on our shape. Our core shadow is going to be the darkest area on our shape. So I'm going to grab the pen tool again, and finding where that dark area is on our shape, I'm just going to click, and I'm going to click again to draw a line up. So I've added another label here. So now we've got our highlight labeled, we've got our core shadow labeled. The core shadow is the farthest away from our light source, so our light isn't reaching this area, and it's making it the darkest. But you'll notice that this isn't a straight, it doesn't form a straight line where it transitions, it curves, and that's what creates the illusion that this is a sphere. If this was a cube, the transition would need to be straight, so we would need to use a linear gradient. I'm actually going to select that line here again, and I'm going to bring it to the front, and I want to change this to a lighter line so you can see it. So I'm going to change my stroke color to something lighter, so now we can kind of see it against that darker color, right? So just past our core shadow, in between the darkest core shadow and the lightest highlight, we have this transition area, kind of like the middle ground, and this is called the midtone. So I will click with my pen or my type tool, and I'll type out midtone. Whoop, all one word. All right, and I'll just kind of place it in the middle there, and we can draw one more line here going up to the text and pulling down there. And we'll switch our fill and stroke to create a stroke. So the midtone is kind of like the fall off that happens between the highlight and the core shadow right in the middle. This is looking good, but if we wanted to take this to the next level, we can add another element called bounce light. And bounce light is what it sounds like. It's when the light hits the surface, if we're pretending that our sphere is on a surface, where it hits the surface, it's going to bounce up. Also, I'll grab my pen tool, and I'm going to click, I'm going to come down, and then I'm going to come up. So you can see that I kind of drew out how it bounces up from that surface and comes up and hits the rim on our sphere here. So to do that, I'm going to click on my sphere. I'll go over to my gradient panel. I'll bring my gradient to the front. I'm going to click on the core shadow, the darkest part, this gradient stop here, this little circle, and I'm going to drag it to the left just a little bit. And then I can grab, I can click right in here where you can see when I hover over it, it makes my cursor have a little plus. I'm going to click there. I'll move that over. Now I'll just double click in here so I can edit the color stop. And I am going to slide all the way down. You can see that it's going to lighten that kind of edge there. So it's going to give us that reflected light when it hits the surface. I need to make a little bit of an adjustment here. This shape is looking a little bit too harsh. So I'm going to go to my gradient tool again, and you can hover over this. It's a little bit hard to, not zooming. Wanted to grab my zoom in tool here. Oh man, there we go. So I can zoom in here. You can see on this end here, there's this little square here, and when I hover over it, it changes to like a transform widget, and I can grab that and I can scale up, so I can kind of soften that transition. And I can move this up a little bit, so it's going to position our highlight closer, and it's going to soften that edge there for our bounce light, which I have to add the label to. Click my text tool, tap again, and we'll put in bounce light. Alright, there's one more element I want to add here. Speaking of the ground, I want to add a shadow underneath our object to help ground it on our surface. So our shadow below this is going to be the same shape of our object. So I'm going to select my object, I'm going to hit Command C and Command F just to make a copy. But we want to squish this down because we want to flatten it to the surface, right? If we're imagining this is like on a table or something, I'm going to drag it down so that it's flattened to our surface. Then I'm going to go up here, I'm going to Object, Arrange, and I'm going to choose Send to Back. So now it's kind of behind. And again, looking at our light up here, pretending this is our light source, the shadow is going to be cast so the object is going to block the light, and that's what causes this cast shadow, right? So we're going to drag this over to the left a little, or to the right a little bit, my left and right mixed up. We're just going to kind of place it so that it is being cast, the shadow is being created by our shape here. So the lighting's on the left, our shadow's going to be on the right. And this time, we don't want a radial gradient. It looks a little bit weird. So I'm going to switch to a linear gradient. And we need to use this little reverse gradient option here to switch our lighting, or our gradient, so that it's darker on the left and it gets lighter on the right here. As the light hits our sphere, the darkest part of our cast shadow is going to be right below our object, and it's going to get lighter as it falls off to the right. So I can get rid of in my gradient here. I don't need the bounce light anymore. We can just work with black and white. I'm going to slide it over a little bit to the left. And then for this, I'm going to increase the transition between the two, making it a bit darker by clicking on this little diamond. And I'm going to drag it to the right. And that's going to extend the darker part of my shadow so that if I deselect, you can see it's kind of going beyond the edge here. And the darkest part is underneath my shape. All right, so let's have a little bit of fun now. If you're over here on behance.net/Adobe Live, say hi in the live chat. Let me know if you have any questions about what we're doing so far. You can chat live with us and ask questions every day at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. Stony is hanging out. Michelle, Arshard, welcome everybody. Okay, so let's have some fun. I'm going to click on my sphere, and I'm going to hold down Shift and select my shadow. And I'm going to hold down Shift to select my light and my light source direction. I'm going to hit Command C and Command F to copy and paste, and then I'm just going to drag holding down Shift to move it over. So this is looking good, but let's create a different material. This time I want to create something that is shiny. So I am going to click on this, and we can actually use the same gradient here, but we can change the the way that these elements in our shadow or our shading kind of like interact with each other to change the appearance of the material. So over here we've got a really soft material, right? This highlight, we would call this a diffuse highlight. Over here, if we want to make something shiny or make something metallic, we need a specular highlight. It's a very sharp highlight. So in order to create that, I'm going to select my sphere, and I'm going to grab the diamond here in our gradient slider, and I'm going to pull it over to the right. So our midtones are going to get smaller, but and it's going to increase the darkness, but it allows me to make that specular highlight really, really sharp. So I'm going to grab the highlight over here, I'm going to pull it over to the right a bit to make it larger. And now you can see that we've got that really strong, sharp highlight that kind of indicates that this is a metallic object. It's a specular object. Or specular highlight, oh my gosh. All right, we can do the same thing over here with our bounce light as well, since this is going to have a sharper highlight as well. I can pull my core shadow to the left, pull that transition up a little bit, and I'm going to double click in this color stop and lighten this. So I'm going to drag this to the left. We can make that lighter. Actually, let's pull this over a little bit more. Just kind of adjusting as we go. So now these two objects here, if we kind of zoom out, these are both using the same gradient. We haven't changed our color or our colors at all, right? We're just working with grays. We haven't changed our grays at all. We've just adjusted the positioning of those elements so that this looks like a metallic object and this one looks more like a diffuse or a plastic object. So, okay, so now we have some references for different materials, and we've got our base over here. I'm going to make another copy by selecting, I'm going to select this object. I'm going to select everything over here. Holding down Shift to select my sphere, my shadow, and my lights. I'll hold down Alt or Option and drag, making a copy. We'll move it over here. Now let's add color. Let's see how this looks with color. So I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to select my original sphere. I'm going to go over here, and to my gradient slider, I'm going to change these color stops to be, instead of being grayscale, we're going to change them to be color. So I'm going to double click in this first one, and I'm going to go up to this hamburger menu, and I'm going to drop down to hue, saturation, and brightness. That lets me change the hue, saturation, and the brightness. We're going to bring the saturation up so that it's no longer a black sphere. Bring up the brightness a little bit so you can actually see what we're doing. And then I'm going to just slide our hue slider over. Maybe we'll go with like blue today. Something like that. And keeping in mind that right now we're adjusting the core shadow. So the darkest part of our gradient is changing, so we do want to keep that brightness slider pretty far down. That looks good. And then I can double click into my, I lost my train of thought, my bounce light, and I'm going to go to hue, saturation, and brightness, and this time I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull up my saturation, dragging to the right. I need to bring that brightness back up. Saturation down. And now we've got the bounce light also in color. I'm also going to do the same thing over here to my highlight, double clicking in here. I will change this to a hue, saturation, and brightness, and we'll just bring up the saturation a little bit, adding a little bit of color to that. So we were very easily able to take this from grayscale to color, but there's a couple other fun things we can do now. I can select all of the shapes here that make up my light, my object, and my cast shadow. And holding down Alt or Option, I can drag down another copy. So we've got another copy down here. And this time, I'm going to change the color of my light. Let's get weird. I'm going to select the light up here, and we're going to make this, instead of pretending it's a white light, which is what we've been doing so far, I'm going to make this a warm light. And that light is going to change the way that our sphere looks, because when it hits the surface of our object, it's hitting the highlight first, and the highlight color is going to change. It's going to pick up that color from our light. So I'm going to click on my sphere. I can double click to go into, whoop, I added another color stop. If that happens, you can just drag it off. I'm going to double click to hop into my color stop, and now you can see up here, if I bring up the saturation, it'll make it easier to see. You can see this hue up here, it changes so that it's warmer on the far right side and on the far left side. I'm going to drag it in the direction that we're already at. We're at like the cool portion of the hue slider. I'm going to drag it to the right here. And that's going to immediately warm up that highlight. It's a little bit strong right now. I just wanted to show you the direction that we were dragging. It's a little bit easier to see the colors that way. So I'm going to drag it so it's a little bit warmer. So we've kind of taken the blue of our sphere and we've mixed in some of that warm light. And as a result, the mixture of the warm light and the cool sphere makes kind of this middle ground. It's not like 100% like this orange, and it's not 100% that like blue that we started with. It's kind of in between there, which is purple, right? So I'll slide this back down so that it actually looks like a highlight. And you can see that that just kind of makes it feel like it's all part of the same scene. And I will deselect. Now, I didn't change the bounce light in this situation. I'm keeping it the same. It won't be as impacted by the warm light, so my bounce light can stay this cool color, and it also kind of fits with our cooler cast shadow. But if I drag these both again, and I'll zoom out, and I am going to just use Alt and drag again. I'll make another copy. I'm just going to drag and select to move these all up so we have a little bit more room on our artboard here. This time, I am going to add a another element at play here. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to grab the rectangle tool. And I'm going to draw out a rectangle. So I'm going to create a surface for our ball to sit on, or our sphere. I don't want a gradient in this though. I want to add like a color to this. So I'm going to pick a warm color surface for this to sit on. And I'm going to go to Object, Arrange, Send to Back. Oop, not send backwards, send all the way to the back. Okay, there we go. So now we've got our ball sitting on a warm surface. I'm going to just quickly blend this cast shadow into our background by going to, I gotta find it, the transparency panel. If you can't find it, just go up here to Window and Transparency down here to open it up. And I'm going to use a blending mode on this to blend it in. I'm going to switch to a multiply blending mode, and that's just going to kind of immediately darken the cast shadow and mix it in with our warmer background there. The multiply blending mode is taking that the values, and anything that's dark is going to darken over our color, and anything that's light is just going to kind of blend in and disappear with our color. So There we go. Juan is asking, how will you make the sphere look more glossy? Can you add a layer with white spots and a blur? Yeah, you could. So if we go up here really quickly, I can switch back to my ellipse tool, and you could add like a second highlight here. So I'll just drag a circle out and change it to white. I think I've got the blending mode turned on still, so switch it back to normal. And you could start to add this like little secondary specular highlight here if you wanted to. I could go up and I could use an effect, like Juan is saying, go to blur and add a Gaussian blur just to kind of soften it a little bit. And now we've got like a secondary specular highlight there on our sphere. Alright, so now we've got a warm surface for our warm light object. And I can add in to our bounce light now. Since the light is hitting this colored surface, it's going to reflect back that color. So I'm going to go back into my gradient, and over here on my bounce light, I'm going to double click, and I'm going to switch to hue, saturation, and brightness, and I will slide that so that it is also warm now. Just like that. Probably too much. Too much purple. Let's go back in here and drag it back out. There we go. And you can mix and match these as well. So I could take this whole thing here, I can drag to select our whole set, holding out Alt. I can drag to make a copy. Run out of room on my artboard, but that's okay. We'll just select everything and move it over. And I can mix and match these. So let's say we have a warm surface, we're getting that warm surface light. I will change my lighting up here though to be a cool light this time. And now when the cooler light hits our sphere, I'm going to click on our gradient here, and I will double click on our highlight. And instead of dragging to the right over here to get like warmer, I'm going to go the opposite way, and I'm going to make this a cooler highlight on our sphere here. So then I will deselect, and I will leave this, I will leave our bounce light the warm color because it's getting combined with the surface light here, and our highlight is being hit by the cooler light. So our highlight is picking up the cooler color, and our bounce light is a bit warmer from the warm surface. There we go. Okay, so now you've got this nice reference. We play with different materials. We took a look at different colors. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go to File, Export, Export for Screens. And for today's, you're going to want to go into these settings and you're going to want to make sure that your background color is set to white so that it exports with the background color instead of being transparent. I'm using a PNG, so if it says transparent, switch it to white. And then I'll just export it to my desktop. And once you are ready to share your work and get some feedback in our Discord, you can slide on over to our Discord over here. You can find the link in the description below this video to our Creative Cloud communities, including our Illustrator Discord. You're going to want to upload your work to the feedback section. It'll say challenge. And I can just go over here and I can drag my artboard with my designs on it straight into the challenge channel, and I can just hit enter, and that's going to upload it straight to the Discord. You can check out what everybody else is working on. Seek Bobby's got the perspective text going on. We've got some really great chalkboard signs. I love Mitsu, this like how you did the illustrations using the chalk effect. It's super cool. I love that you went really above and beyond there on that one. We've got some icons from Kadrov, so lots of cool stuff going on in here. Be sure to check out what everybody's working on, and you can get some feedback from our mentors. So, we went over a lot of stuff today. Feel free to keep experimenting, trying out different materials, different lighting situations, warm lighting, cool lighting, lighting from the top, lighting from the right. You can use all these same techniques with linear gradients or with freeform gradients. You can experiment with adding transparency to create glass materials. But I would recommend that you keep this file as a reference if you ever need a refresher, or if you ever need to look back and remember what we kind of talked about, or like, how did we make that cool lighting on a warm light surface again? It's a really handy kind of file to keep handy. So, thank you all for joining me today for an Illustrator Foundations Challenge. we went over lighting fundamentals using basic shapes and gradients. But you can, like I said, you can apply these to any kind of illustrations that you create. We're live every day at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time at behance.net/Adobe Live. But stay tuned here on Behance for more live content right after me. And I can't wait to see what you all create in the Discord. Bye, everyone.